I discovered a truth that shattered my world in an instant, like a glitch in the code I'd spent years perfecting. My name is Ethan Caldwell, a 44-year-old software engineer specializing in cybersecurity systems for major tech firms in Portland, Oregon. The city's misty mornings and evergreen backdrop had always felt like a secure firewall around my life. But that night, everything cracked open. I was hunched over my desk in the home office, the glow of my dual monitors casting long shadows across the room, cluttered with tangled cables, empty coffee mugs, and sticky notes, scribbled with algorithm ideas. The email popped into my inbox with a soft chime that echoed louder than it should have in the quiet house. It was from Lauren, my wife of 12 years, the woman I'd built my life around like a robust database. She was supposed to be at a meditation retreat in the rugged mountains of Colorado, unplugging from the digital world she claimed overwhelmed her. The timestamp glared at me, 10:15 p.m., Mountain Time, which meant she was wide awake while I was winding down on Pacific Time. The subject line was blank, but the body hit like a denial of service attack. I've transferred your inheritance to my account. It's for the best. No preamble, no apology, just cold calculated words. Attached was a blurry photo that loaded slowly pixel by pixel, revealing the betrayal. There she was, Lauren, her auburn hair tousled by a high-altitude breeze, leaning into a tall guy with a scruffy beard and a smug grin. They stood on a wooden balcony overlooking a fiery mountain sunset, clinking cocktails. Hers a vibrant red, probably a cranberry vodka, her favorite escape drink. Her smile in that photo was radiant, genuine, the kind that crinkled her eyes and lit up her face in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in what felt like forever. It was a smile reserved for new beginnings, not the fading embers of our marriage. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, the one she'd bought me 2 Christmases ago, to ease my back pain from long coding sessions, and felt a numbness creep in. I shut the laptop with a deliberate click, the sound final, like closing a faulty program. Pushing away from the desk, I wandered into the living room, my bare feet padding softly on the hardwood floors we'd refinished together during a rare weekend off. The space was a testament to our shared history bookshelves, lined with tech manuals and her wellness guides, a cozy sectional couch where we'd binge-watched series on rainy Portland evenings, and framed photos from trips to the Oregon coast, smiles frozen in happier times. I headed to the kitchen, the heart of our home, and poured a tall glass of sparkling water from the fridge dispenser, the bubbles fizzing like the static in my mind. Leaning against the granite counter, cool and unyielding, I stared out the window at the backyard we'd transformed 4 summers ago. I remembered the sweat-soaked days, me stringing up those fairy lights that twinkled like stars on summer nights, her kneeling in the dirt, planting rows of lavender that now bloomed purple and fragrant under the moonlight. We'd laughed about getting dirt under our nails, her teasing me for my precise measurements, while I admired her free-spirited planting style. All that effort, all those shared dreams poured into a home she apparently had no intention of returning to. It stung, but not as deeply as I expected. The inheritance she mentioned, $500,000 from my Uncle Henry, wasn't just a windfall. It was a lifeline, a legacy etched in sacrifice. Henry had taken me in at 15 after my parents' car accident on a slick highway during one of Portland's infamous downpours. He'd worked grueling overtime shifts at the auto factory, his hands calloused and grease-stained, to put me through community college and then Oregon State for my computer science degree. When he passed last year, his will included a simple, handwritten note tucked into the envelope. "Create something enduring, Ethan. Make it count." Those words had guided me, a quiet code to live by. Now, Lauren had tried to hijack it as if it were just another asset in her growing empire of eco-friendly skincare products. I glanced at my phone on the counter. No missed calls, no frantic texts explaining or begging forgiveness. Just silence, thick and telling, like she'd already rebooted her life without me. The signs had been flashing red for months, warning lights I'd ignored in the haze of work deadlines and marital routine. Her meditation retreats had started innocently enough, a weekend here, a few days there, but they'd stretched longer, 2 days turning into 4, then week-long escapes to recenter her energy. Her phone, once casually left on the coffee table, now stayed face down, buzzing with notifications she'd silence quickly. Passwords changed without explanation, our conversations once flowing like open-source code now clipped and evasive. 3 months ago, over a dinner of grilled salmon and quinoa, her latest health kick, she'd casually probed about the inheritance. Where exactly is it parked? Which banks? Maybe we should diversify, spread it out for better returns. I'd nodded, fork paused midair, and said, I'd think about it, but a small alarm bell rang in my head. Why the sudden interest? She'd never cared about our finances beyond her business expenses. I reopened the laptop back in the office, the screen's blue light harsh against my eyes. Rereading the email, I noted the absence of any warmth. No, dear Ethan. No sign-off with her name. Just the declaration of theft, bold and unapologetic. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, anger simmering but contained. I typed 6 words. Thanks for the heads up. Hit send. Then I closed the laptop again, finished my sparkling water in one long gulp, the carbonation burning my throat, and headed upstairs to bed. The staircase creaked under my weight, each step a reminder of the home's age and our plans to renovate further. Tomorrow would be a marathon of calls and decisions, but as I slipped under the covers of our king-sized bed, the emptiness beside me brought an unexpected peace. I stretched out, claiming the whole space, and realized something profound. I slept better knowing she wasn't coming home. The sheets felt cooler, the room quieter without her soft breathing or the faint scent of her lavender lotion. What Lauren didn't know, and this was the ace up my sleeve, was that I'd sensed the glitch in our system months ago. The inheritance had never been in the vulnerable spot she assumed. I'd secured it in an irrevocable trust, a digital fortress Henry's lawyer had insisted on, and her clumsy attempt to breach it had just provided me with the logs I needed to expose everything. As sleep pulled me under, fragments of our past flickered like old code snippets. I met Lauren 15 years ago at a bustling tech conference in Seattle, the air thick with the hum of presentations and networking chatter. I was there pitching my early cybersecurity prototypes, 6 years into a career that had me grinding through corporate firewalls and bug hunts. She was a vibrant force, launching her eco-friendly skincare line, all natural ingredients and sustainable packaging, and she needed developers to build her online store. Our eyes met across a crowded expo hall, her booth adorned with green banners and sample jars. You look like someone who could make my website unbreakable, she'd said with a wink, her energy pulling me in like a strong Wi-Fi signal. We hit it off instantly. Coffee turned into dinner ideas, bouncing between us like ping-pong packets. Within 3 years, we were married in a small ceremony on the Oregon coast, waves crashing as we exchanged vows under a driftwood arch. We settled in Portland, drawn to its tech scene and her love for the Pacific Northwest's natural vibes. We bought this bungalow on a tree-lined street with its charming front porch where she'd sip herbal tea at dawn. No kids, that was her choice from the start. My business is my baby. She'd laugh, eyes sparkling as she described her latest product launch. I understood. My software projects were my offspring, lines of code birthed in late-night sessions. For 9 solid years, our life hummed along smoothly. I climbed the ranks at my firm, designing systems that protected data for Fortune 500 companies. She expanded her brand from online sales to pop-up shops and those wellness retreats that blended yoga with skincare demos. We traveled weekends in Vancouver, a month in Europe, hitting tech hubs and organic farms. We hosted barbecues in our backyard, friends toasting our power couple status, our social media feeds a curated gallery of hikes, home-cooked meals, and affectionate selfies. We looked flawless on the surface, a well-oiled machine. But then Uncle Henry got sick, lung disease from years of factory fumes, progressing fast and merciless, like a virus spreading through a network. I took a 4-month partial leave, commuting to Boise to care for him, managing his meds, driving to appointments, sitting by his bed as he shared stories from my childhood. Lauren visited only once, her face pale in the sterile hospital room. Hospitals stress me out, Ethan. The beeps, the smells, it drains my energy, she explained later over a tense phone call. I didn't push. I was too exhausted, too focused on Henry's fading strength. When he died peacefully one rainy afternoon, the inheritance came as a shock. $500,000 meticulously saved and invested over decades. Lauren's reaction was telling. Her eyes widened at the figure, and suddenly she was all about financial planning. We could use it to scale my brand, she suggested one evening over dinner, candlelight flickering on her face. Think of it, new product lines, international shipping. Henry would have wanted us to grow something together. I need to think about what he'd really want, I replied, my voice steady but my mind racing. That was the first real crack, a subtle divide in our code. Others followed like cascading errors. Her trips ramped up research for suppliers, networking events, calls from hotel rooms growing shorter, background noises she'd hush when I inquired. our neighbor Tom, a retired mechanic with a knack for noticing details, stopped by one afternoon with a plate of his wife's famous chocolate chip cookies. Saw a guy dropping Lauren off late last week, he mentioned, casually wiping his hands on his jeans. Around midnight. Thought you were at that Austin conference. I had been presenting on AI-driven threat detection. I thanked him for the treats, the sweetness cloying as I filed away the intel. No questions asked, just a mental note in my ever-growing log of anomalies. Then the password changes hit our shared banking app, suddenly locked her, explaining it as extra security with a shrug. Financial talks turned evasive. She'd pivot when I pressed for details. One night I found her in the backyard under the string lights, phone pressed to her ear, her laughter light and flirtatious, a sound I hadn't heard aimed at me in ages. "Just Sarah from the studio," she said breezily upon returning inside, pouring herself a generous glass of Pinot Noir. Sarah, who'd quit her company over a year ago amid some drama Lauren never fully explained. I nodded, didn't correct her lie, just observed as she changed the subject to her upcoming retreat. The foundation of our marriage was fracturing pixels, distorting one by one, and only I seemed willing to debug it. 2 weeks before she left for what would prove to be her final retreat, my financial advisor Mark called during my lunch break at work. "Ethan, heads up, someone's been trying to access your trust accounts. They used your basic info but bombed the security questions." My stomach tightened. Which accounts? Though I suspected, the inheritance ones. Last 4 of your social was right, but the rest? No dice. I thanked him, ended the call, and stared at my office wall adorned with certificates and a photo of Lauren and me at a company picnic. That evening, Lauren broached consolidating our finances over stir-fry. "It's ridiculous having all these separate logins and passwords," she said, not meeting my eyes as she twirled noodles on her fork. "Let's merge everything, make it simple." "You're probably right," I agreed mildly. "I'll chat with Mark." But the next day, instead of work, I drove the long hours to Boise, the highway winding through forests that mirrored my tangled thoughts. I met with Claire Evans, Henry's lawyer for 2 decades now, mine by inheritance. In her cozy office, smelling of leather-bound books and fresh coffee, I laid out the facts without emotion, the probing questions, the changed passwords, the neighbor's sighting. Claire leaned back, her sharp eyes assessing. "Your uncle was smart to set up that irrevocable trust. It's protected no matter what marital storms brew, and if someone's attempting unauthorized moves, that's financial fraud, plain and simple, with serious repercussions." I nodded, relief, mixing with resolve. "Let's document it all, set up monitoring alerts for any access transfers or changes." By the time I returned home that evening, Lauren had her bags packed by the door, yoga mat rolled neatly beside her suitcase. She gave me a perfunctory kiss, her lips cool. "I might extend this retreat a bit," she said, already mentally elsewhere. "Really immerse myself." I helped load her car, the trunk slamming shut like a period on our chapter. Watching her taillights fade down the street, I went inside, booted up the laptop, and navigated to our shared cloud storage. In a folder innocently labeled Patio Project, our half-baked plan for an outdoor upgrade, I found the digital breadcrumbs she'd forgotten to erase. Screenshots of my account dashboards, copied statements with highlighted balances, handwritten notes scanned in about transfer protocols. Even a photo of a whiteboard in her home office, my $500 thousand minus 15%, scribbled with processing fee. Beside it, she'd been plotting for months a slow-burn hack into our life. I closed the folder methodically and paced the house, our carefully chosen mid-century furniture, abstract art from local galleries, all props in a facade we'd maintained. Instead of rage boiling over, a calm clarity settled like optimizing code after spotting the bug. The betrayal wasn't a shock. What surprised me was my detachment. Our marriage had devolved into a transaction, one she was terminating for a better deal. I slept in the spare room that night, the bed firm and unfamiliar, and began making discreet calls the next morning to Claire for updates, to a private investigator friend from work for tips on digital trails. By the time Lauren's email arrived 5 days later, slicing through the quiet like a notification alert, I'd already fortified my defenses, set traps in the system, and prepared for the fallout. The game was on, and for the first time in years I felt in control. The moment Lauren's email landed, the illusion of our life together flickered like a corrupted display, revealing the fractures I'd ignored for too long. Sitting in my Portland home office, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked cedar drifting through the open window, I replayed the past, piecing together how we'd gone from partners to strangers. "My name's Ethan Caldwell. a 44-year-old software engineer who'd spent years building secure systems for tech giants, yet somehow missed the vulnerabilities in my own marriage. Lauren and I met 15 years ago at a buzzing tech conference in Seattle, the kind where startup founders and coders collide in a frenzy of pitches and espresso. I was 6 years into my career, a hungry developer pitching cybersecurity tools to skeptical investors, my booth a mess of laptops and prototype demos. Across the crowded expo hall, Lauren's setup stood out green banners, jars of her eco-friendly skincare creams, and a vibe that screamed organic optimism. She was 29, all radiant energy, her auburn hair catching the fluorescent lights as she handed out samples with a smile that could debug any bad day. "You look like you could make my website unhackable," she said, leaning over my table with a playful grin. I laughed, caught off guard, and we ended up talking code and commerce over overpriced conference coffee. Her passion for her brand, natural ingredients, sustainable packaging was infectious, and I was hooked not just on her vision, but on her. Coffee turned to dinner, then late-night brainstorming sessions about user interfaces and supply chains. Within 3 years, we were married on the Oregon coast, exchanging vows under a driftwood arch, with waves crashing and seagulls wheeling overhead. We settled in Portland, drawn to its blend of tech hustle and nature's calm, and bought a bungalow on a quiet street lined with maples. Its front porch with a swing she loved became her morning ritual spot, herbal tea in hand, sketching product ideas. No kids her choice from the start. "My business is my baby," she'd say, her eyes bright with ambition as she described new serums or pop-up shop plans. I got it. My code firewall's encryption algorithms was my legacy, each line a piece of me poured into protecting data from invisible threats. For 9 years, we were a solid team. I climbed the ranks at my firm, securing contracts with Fortune 500 companies, my days a blur of coding marathons and client calls. Lauren's brand grew from an online shop to brick-and-mortar stores in Portland and Seattle, her wellness retreats blending yoga with skincare workshops. We traveled weekends hiking in Vancouver, a month in Europe, touring tech hubs and organic farms for her suppliers. Our backyard barbecues were legendary among friends, the string lights glowing as we served craft beers and her famous kale salads. On Instagram, we were the quintessential Pacific Northwest couple hiking trails, sipping local coffee, captioning posts with hashtags like #TeamCaldwell. But beneath the curated posts, the first bugs in our system appeared when Uncle Henry got sick. Lung disease, aggressive and relentless, ate away at the man who'd raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 15. Henry, a stoic factory worker with a knack for fixing anything, had been my anchor, working overtime to fund my education, teaching me to value precision and persistence. I took a 4-month partial leave, driving to Boise every weekend to manage his care, sorting pills, navigating hospital bureaucracy, holding his hand as he reminisced about my teenage antics. Lauren came once early, on her face tight, in the sterile hospital room. "Hospitals stress me out, Ethan," she said later over a crackling phone call, her voice distant. "The machines, the antiseptic smell, it drains me." I didn't push, too consumed with Henry's decline, but her absence left a quiet ache. When he passed on a rainy March afternoon, his hand limp in mine, the $500,000 inheritance stunned me. Henry had saved and invested with a discipline I never knew. His life's work distilled into a number and a note. "Create something enduring, Ethan. Make it count." Lauren's reaction was different. Her eyes lit up, not with grief, but with opportunity. Over dinner one night, candlelight flickering on her face, she leaned in. "We could scale my brand with this. New product lines, maybe a flagship store in Denver. Henry would have wanted us to dream big." Her words felt off, like a script running on the wrong system. "I need to think about what he'd really want," I said, cutting into my steak, the knife scraping the plate. That was the first crack, a subtle shift in our dynamic, like a variable misaligned in code. More followed, each one harder to ignore. Lauren's trips multiplied, supposedly for supplier meetings or inspiration for her retreats. A weekend in Sedona became a week in Santa Fe, then 10 days in Colorado for market research. Her calls grew brief. Her voice clipped background noises, laughter, clinking glasses fading when I asked who was there. "Just the team," she'd say. But the pauses felt heavy. Our neighbor Tom, a retired mechanic with a habit of tinkering in his garage, stopped by one Sunday with a Tupperware of his wife's chocolate chip cookies. "Saw a guy dropping Lauren off last Thursday," he said, scratching his beard. "Late, maybe 11 p.m. Thought you were at that Austin thing. I was presenting at a cybersecurity summit. I thanked him, the cookie's sweetness clashing with the bitter knot in my gut, and filed it away like a flagged error log. Then came the digital locks. Our shared banking apps, once open for both of us, started rejecting my logins, just added extra security. Lauren shrugged when I asked her eyes on her phone. Talks about money turned into dead ends. She'd pivot to her latest product launch or a yoga pose she'd mastered. One night under the backyard, string lights. I caught her on the phone, her voice low and warm, laughing in a way that used to be reserved for me. She slipped inside, wine glass in hand, and brushed it off. Just Sarah from the studio catching up. Sarah, who'd left her company a year earlier after some vague falling out. I nodded, didn't call out the lie, just watched her pour more Pinot Noir and steer the conversation to her next retreat. The truth was sinking in. Our marriage was a network under attack, and only I was running diagnostics. 2 weeks before her so-called final retreat, my financial advisor Mark called while I was debugging code at work. "Ethan, someone's been poking at your trust accounts," he said, his voice low. "Used your basic info, last 4 of your social, but flunked the security questions." My pulse quickened, though I'd half expected it. "Which accounts?" "The inheritance ones. They tried multiple times, but the system's locked tight." I thanked him, my mind already tracing the source. That night over stir-fries, she'd barely touched Lauren, brought up our finances again. "It's such a hassle managing all these separate accounts," she said, twirling her fork, avoiding my gaze. "Why don't we consolidate one login, one password cleaner?" "Makes sense," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I'll talk to Mark." But instead, I drove to Boise the next morning, the 5-hour trip a blur of pine forests and my own spiraling thoughts. Claire Evans. Henry's lawyer, and now mine, welcomed me into her office, the walls lined with legal texts and framed diplomas. I laid out the evidence without emotion, Lauren's probing questions, the locked apps. Tom's comment about the late-night drop-off. Claire's eyes narrowed, her pen tapping her desk. Henry's trust is a fortress, irrevocable, untouchable. Even in a divorce, any attempt to move those funds without your approval. That's fraud. Ethan, with legal consequences. I exhaled a weightlifting. "Set up monitoring," I told her. "Alerts for any access attempts, transfers, anything." She nodded, already pulling up forms. Back home, Lauren was packing for her retreat, her suitcase stuffed with yoga gear and new outfits I didn't recognize. She gave me a quick peck, her lips brushing mine like an afterthought. "Might stay a bit longer this time," she said, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Really dive into the mindfulness thing." I carried her suitcase to the car, the gravel crunching under my boots, and watched her drive off, taillights swallowed by the dusk. Inside, I opened our shared cloud storage on my laptop, navigating to a folder labeled Patio Project, our abandoned plan for an outdoor oasis. There, buried among innocent PDFs of deck designs, were her digital footprints, screenshots of my trust account login pages, scanned bank statements with my inheritance, highlighted notes on transfer protocols, and a photo of her whiteboard. $500, 1,000 minus 15% with processing fee. Scrawled in her neat handwriting. My stomach churned, not with shock but with confirmation. She'd been planning this heist for months, a slow infiltration while I was distracted by work and grief. I closed the folder, my fingers steady, and paced the house. The living room's mid-century couch, the abstract art we'd picked at a Portland gallery, the kitchen where we'd danced to indie playlists on lazy Sundays. It all felt like a stage set for a life we no longer lived. The betrayal didn't spark rage, but a cold, clear focus, like spotting a bug in 1,000 lines of code. Our marriage had become a transaction, and Lauren was cashing out, betting on a better return elsewhere. I slept in the guest room that night, the mattress stiff but grounding, and started my calls at dawn. Claire for trust updates, a colleague who moonlighted as a PI for digital forensics tips. I didn't hack her phone or snoop her emails. I didn't need to. The evidence was already there, plain as a server log. 5 days later, when her email arrived, blunt, unapologetic, with that damning photo, it wasn't a surprise. It was the trigger I'd been waiting for. I'd already patched the vulnerabilities, set my traps, and prepared to rewrite the narrative. Lauren thought she'd executed the perfect breach. She had no idea she'd just tripped the alarm. Lauren's email was the spark that ignited my counterstrike, a digital flare exposing the fault lines in our crumbling marriage. Sitting in my Portland home office, the faint hum of my computer tower mixing with the patter of rain against the window, I stared at the screen where her words. "I've transferred your inheritance to my account." It's for the best. Sat like a virus waiting to be neutralized. The attached photo, blurry but damning, showed her with a bearded stranger, their cocktails glinting against a Colorado sunset. I was Ethan Caldwell, a 44-year-old software engineer who'd spent years fortifying systems against breaches, yet here I was facing a personal hack I'd seen coming but hadn't fully prepared for emotionally. The inheritance, she targeted, $5,000 from my Uncle Henry, was locked in an irrevocable trust, a safeguard I'd set up with his lawyer Claire Evans months ago when Lauren's behavior started glitching. That night, after sending a curt reply, "Thanks for the heads up," I closed my laptop, the click echoing in the silent house. I poured a glass of sparkling water, the bubbles sharp against my throat, and stood in the kitchen, gazing at the backyard where fairy lights swayed in the breeze, illuminating lavender beds we'd planted together. The betrayal didn't burn as I expected. Instead, it brought a strange calm, like debugging code after spotting the error. I'd sensed her drift for months, her extended retreats locked phone-evasive answers, and had already fortified my defenses. Now her move had handed me the leverage I needed. I waited exactly 24 hours before acting, letting the clock tick like a countdown to a system reboot. No frantic calls, no emotional texts, just calculated steps. First, I forwarded Lauren's email to Mark, my financial advisor, and Claire with a simple note. "Please document." They didn't need context. The evidence spoke for itself. Then I dialed Rachel Holt, a divorce lawyer Claire had recommended months earlier during a cautious what-if discussion. Her office downtown in a sleek building overlooking the Willamette River was all glass and steel, a stark contrast to the chaos of my personal life. We met that afternoon, her sharp eyes scanning the email printout and trust documents Claire had sent over. "Her email is a confession," Rachel said, tapping a pen against her desk, the rhythm steady like a metronome. "The trust is untouchable, never mixed with marital assets protected by law, her attempt to access it. That's financial fraud." Ethan with a clear paper trail. I nodded, the weight of her words grounding me. "What's next?" "File for divorce citing financial misconduct. Oregon allows fault-based claims when fraud's involved. This gives us a strong position." I signed the paperwork, my signature steady despite the storm inside. By noon, Lauren texted, "Got my email?" I replied, "Yep." Minutes later, she pushed, "That's it." I left her hanging, no response, letting her stew in the silence. At 3:30 p.m., my phone rang, Lauren's name flashing on the screen. I answered, keeping my voice flat. "You're being immature," she snapped. No greeting, her tone sharp as a blade. "The money's moved. Fighting this just racks up legal fees for both of us. Where are you staying?" I asked, sidestepping her bait. A pause, her breath catching. "Why does that matter?" "Just curious where home is now. Focus, Ethan. Let's settle this cleanly. My lawyer, Greg Palmer, is already on it." I jotted down the name, a new variable in my equation. "Thanks for the info. Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said, her voice softening slightly, like she was trying to debug her own mistake. "You said that already," I replied, neutral as a blank terminal screen. "I appreciate you wanting this to be easy." Another pause, longer this time. "What are you doing?" "Just processing," I said, getting used to the idea. I heard her exhale, misreading my calm as surrender. "It's for the best, Ethan. We've been on different paths for a while." Agreed. Clean is best. I hung up, forwarded Greg's name to Rachel, and sent Lauren a single text. "Need time to think. We'll reach out soon." Her reply came fast. "Don't wait. Papers ready by Friday. 3 days away, perfect timing for my plan." At 5 p.m., Claire called, her voice clipped and professional. "The trust company logged 3 transfer attempts today, all blocked. We've got IP addresses, timestamps, everything originating from Colorado, not Boulder, as she claimed, but Denver." She paused, then added, "There's more. Last month, someone exported account details from your home Wi-Fi, device IDs, timestamps, all documented." My jaw tightened, but I thanked her, hung up, and walked to the kitchen. I opened a bottle of aged whiskey meant for our 15th anniversary, the amber liquid catching the light like a warning signal. Pouring 2 fingers into a glass, I stood by the counter, the house around me feeling less like a home and more like a crime scene. Lauren thought she'd executed a clean hack, but she'd tripped every alarm I'd set. The whiskey burned, grounding me as I planned my next move. The next morning, Greg Palmer called, his tone cautious, like a man's stepping through a minefield. Ms. Caldwell indicates you're open to a fair settlement, Mr. Caldwell. Which part? I asked, leaning back in my office chair, the city's skyline muted by fog outside. The inheritance transfer, he said carefully. She provided statements from 3 months ago. Did she mention the trust structure? It's irrevocable, legally untouchable. Silence stretched across the line. I suggest you verify her claims, I said. My lawyer's sending you documents today. I hung up, drove to Willamette Bank where Lauren and I had managed our joint accounts for years. The manager, Susan, a no-nonsense woman who'd handled our mortgage refinance, welcomed me into her office. I need to see all recent activity on our joint accounts, I said, settling into a leather chair. Susan's brow furrowed as she pulled up the records, her fingers clicking rapidly on the keyboard. There's been significant movement, she said, turning the monitor toward me. The screen showed a trail of transfers. Down to $500, AO $4,000, then a gut punch $40,000 2 weeks ago to an account at Cascade Credit Union one I didn't recognize. Total withdrawn $150,000 over 3 months. This receiving account, I pointed at the number, is it with you? Susan checked. No, it's external. Cascade's based in Denver. I'd never heard of it. Print me the transaction history last 6 months. As the printer hummed, Rachel texted, Palmer wants an urgent meeting. Tones shifted. Back at Rachel's office, the picture sharpened. The Cascade account was in Lauren's name, only tied to an apartment lease in Denver. She's been building a parallel life. Rachel said, her voice steady but laced with disdain. While still accessing yours, I added, staring at the bank records spread across her desk. Rachel's assistant buzzed in. Greg Palmer on the line. I've reviewed the trust documentation, he said, his voice tight, like a man realizing he's been sold a bad script. My client may have overstated her ability to access those funds. That's an understatement, Rachel replied. We've filed for divorce citing financial misconduct. The evidence is airtight. Greg cleared his throat. Given this, a revised settlement discussion might benefit everyone. Rachel ended the call, her eyes meeting mine. He'll drop her by end of day. No decent lawyer touches this mess. What about the $150,000 she took from our accounts, I asked. We'll include it in the filing. Let her explain to a judge why she set up a secret account and drained marital funds. I nodded, a hollow feeling settling in my chest. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment betrayal. It was a calculated operation planned while she slept beside me, shared meals, made empty promises about our future. One more thing, I said, my voice low. I need to know who he is. Not for a fight, not for the case, just to understand what I missed. Rachel's expression softened. I'll have someone look into it. That evening, a courier arrived at my doorstep, the bell cutting through the quiet house. The envelope held Greg's formal withdrawal as Lauren's lawyer copies sent to her in the court. My phone lit up with her calls, 3 in a row, each going to voicemail. Her text followed. What the hell did you do? I didn't respond, eating a turkey sandwich at the kitchen counter, the bread stale but grounding. Claire emailed, next subject line, update. The trust company's investigation confirmed multiple unauthorized access attempts over 3 months, all logged with IP addresses and device IDs. They'd referred the matter to their legal team for potential criminal charges. No action needed from you yet, Claire wrote, but this door's open. I forwarded it to Rachel. At 9 p.m., Lauren texted again. We need to talk, now. I replied, through your new lawyer. Yeah, her response was frantic. You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't move anything. I was upset when I wrote that email. The logs say otherwise, I typed back. A long pause, then. What logs? Instead of answering, I sent one question. Who's he? 20 minutes ticked by. Finally, it's not about him. Ryan Tate, just a friend helping me through this. I searched the name Ryan Tate, a Denver yoga instructor, ex-financial consultant who ditched Wall Street for authentic connections, according to his LinkedIn. The next morning I met Tom, our neighbor, over coffee in his garage, the air thick with motor oil. The guy dropping Lauren off, I started showing him the blurry photo from her email. This him. Tom squinted, nodding. Yeah, tall, beard, blue SUV. I'm on him maybe 6 times while you were traveling. He agreed to provide a statement, no hesitation. By 11 a.m., Rachel called. Complication. Lauren's hired Michael Grant, aggressive divorce lawyer, big reputation. He's pushing for an emergency hearing claiming all financial moves were mutually agreed. When's the hearing? Monday. 3 days out. I thought of the Denver apartment, the Cascade account, Ryan Tate in my driveway. Give Grant something to chew on, I said. That afternoon, Rachel sent Grant a packaged trust access logs, bank transfer records, the Denver lease, Tom's notarized statement, and screenshots from Lauren's patio project folder detailing her plan to siphon my inheritance. By 5 p.m., Grant called voice tense requesting a settlement meeting. He's seen the evidence, Rachel told me later. Offers a split, she keeps the $150,000, you keep the house in trust. No further claims. Counter. I said, my voice firm. She returns half the $150,000, signs an NDA, and I won't pursue fraud charges. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You could push for more? I don't want more. I want closure. The trap was set, and Lauren had walked right into it, unaware the system was rigged against her from the start. The morning of what should have been a contentious courtroom showdown felt oddly serene, like the quiet after a system reboot. I sat in a consultation room at the Portland courthouse, its sterile walls and fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of my unraveling marriage. Lauren's email, her bold claim of stealing my $500,000 inheritance from Uncle Henry, had set this in motion, but my careful preparations had turned her betrayal into her own undoing. I'm Ethan Caldwell, a 44-year-old software engineer who'd spent years securing digital fortresses for tech giants, yet nearly missed the breach in my personal life. Now, with the evidence stacked against Lauren trust logs, bank records, a Denver apartment lease, and our neighbor's testimony about her mystery man, was ready to close this chapter. Rachel Holt. My divorce lawyer had orchestrated everything with precision, and as I waited, the weight of the past months settled like code compiling into a final output. Outside the glass-walled room, I saw Lauren arrive with her new lawyer, Michael Grant, a heavy hitter known for aggressive tactics. Her face was pale, her auburn hair pulled into a tight bun, a far cry from the carefree smile in that damning Colorado photo with Ryan Tate. Rachel was already there, a slim folder on the table, no judge, no public spectacle, just a settlement agreement ready to end this cleanly. Rachel had delivered a crushing package to Grant the day before, trust access logs showing Lauren's failed attempts to touch my inheritance, bank records of her $150,000 siphoned from our joint accounts, the Denver lease in her name, Tom's notarized statement about Ryan's visits, and screenshots from her patio project cloud folder detailing her plan to steal my funds. Grant's call last night had been telling. His tone shifted from combative to conciliatory, proposing a meeting to resolve matters. Rachel laid out our terms. Lauren would return $75,000, half the money she'd taken from our joint accounts, within 24 hours, make no claims on the inheritance or other assets, and sign a non-disclosure agreement barring her from discussing our marriage or divorce publicly. In return, I'd drop any pursuit of fraud charges related to her trust access attempts. Through the glass, I watched Lauren's expression shift as Rachel handed Grant the evidence file, photographs, log statements. Her eyes widened, defiance crumbling into shock, then something like resignation. Grant leaned in, whispering, his hand on her arm. She nodded slowly, lips pressed tight. They entered the room, the air thick with tension. My client accepts the terms, Grant said, his voice formal but strained like a program forced to terminate early. Rachel slid the agreement across the table, a single sheet outlining the end of our 12-year marriage. Lauren's hand trembled as she signed her pen, scratching the paper, her usual confident flourish reduced to a shaky scrawl. I signed my portion, my hand steady, and slid a separate envelope toward her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice low. The first words she'd spoken to me in weeks. "Access codes," I said, meeting her gaze. "Cloud storage house alarm, anything you might need to collect what's left behind." Her eyes searched mine, hunting for anger or triumph, but I offered neither. I'd debugged my emotions over the past months, stripping away the hurt to find clarity. She looked lost, her green eyes clouded in a way I'd never seen, not even in our worst fights. "It was never just the money, Lauren," I said quietly, almost to myself. That would have been simpler. Grant touched her elbow, guiding her to stand. She clutched the envelope, her knuckles white, and left without looking back, her heels clicking down the courthouse hall. The door closed, and the silence felt like a system reset. 6 months later, I sold the bungalow on our quiet Portland street. The memories lingered in every corner, the front porch where Lauren sipped tea, the backyard lavender beds we'd planted, the kitchen where we danced to indie playlists. It was too much like living in a deprecated program. The new owners, a young couple with a toddler who giggled at the porch swing, Loved the fairy lights and flower beds. I moved to a minimalist condo downtown, a short walk from my firm's office with floor-to-ceiling windows and sparse furniture, a bed, a desk, a single bookshelf for my tech manuals, and Henry's old journals. The simplicity suited me, a clean slate after years of clutter. Claire Evans, Henry's lawyer, helped me channel the $500,000 inheritance into a scholarship fund for orphaned teens pursuing coding, honoring Henry's note. Create something enduring. The first recipient was a 16-year-old from rural Oregon, Mia, whose application essay about building apps to connect isolated communities hit me hard. She wrote about coding as a lifeline, a way to rebuild after losing her parents in a fire. Henry would have rooted for her, Claire said at the award ceremony, her smile warm as we handed Mia the certificate. I nodded, picturing Henry's calloused hands clapping in approval. One spring afternoon, as I sorted mail in my condo's sleek lobby, an unmarked envelope caught my eye. Inside was a check for exactly $75,000, the rest of what Lauren owed, and a brief note. For everything I took, not just the money. No signature, but her handwriting was unmistakable, slanted and precise. I stood there, the check light in my hand, and felt no anger, only closure. That evening, I walked to the Willamette River, the water glinting under the setting sun. Lauren and I had once sat on these benches dreaming of a joint venture, a tech-driven wellness hub I'd designed, she'd run. That vision had crashed long before our marriage, but the river kept flowing, indifferent to our failures. I deposited the check into the scholarship fund the next day, enough for another student to chase their dreams, another chance to build something lasting. My phone buzzed as I left the bank. Mark, my financial advisor, confirming dinner at 7 p.m. Bringing that new developer I told you about, he texted. She's sharp, working on AI encryption. You'll like her. I glanced at my watch, the digital face ticking toward evening. Time enough to head home, change out of my button-down, and step into whatever came next. I texted back, on my way. Standing by the river, the city's hum around me, food carts, cyclists, distant laughter. I felt unmoored but not lost. The strongest response to betrayal isn't revenge. It's rebuilding line by line into something stronger. When trust is broken, the rebuild is what defines you. Let go of the wreckage, honor the past, and code a future that endures.